it seems like everything is kind of falling into place to say like for silver to explode, like the stars are aligning, like you said, the fuse, like the floodgates have opened and everything is kind of just fall like this domino effect, and it's happening quicker and quicker and gaining momentum. And I definitely, especially like with the 2024 election coming up, who wins that could play such a big uh it's just there's just a lot going on. It's just insane
Well,
to
it's everywhere you look. You know,
yeah, that's that.
you look at even places like the Shanghai Gold Exchange and the Shanghai Futures Exchange. Last week, they had in total about 140,000 kilos of silver delivered off the exchange. And both of these exchanges are at their all-time, well, not all-time, that new fresh lows of inventory since silver squeeze. You're seeing last week we saw 1.9 million ounces of silver leave COMEX and SLV. There's someone who wants physical silver,
Right.
and something's going on. Keith Newmeyer came out and said, while he was at a couple of conferences this year, that for the first year he's seen car manufacturers present at these conferences. They're trying to disintermediate the bullion banks and go directly to guys like Keith and say, we'll
Yeah,
take production. We don't want to screw with COMEX. We'll go right to you.
yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, a Tesla takes about a kilo of silver, and as the demand for battery powered vehicles and the demand for green and digital applications continues to grow, you'll see more and more and more industrial need for silver, where it's a depleting asset that is really experienced a renaissance in terms of its monetary value and appreciation. So you're setting up for a war between the industrials and the investors or the hedge funds,
Mm,
and I think that's coming also. But you see BlackRock, who increased its PSLV holdings to almost 22 million shares. The
right,
interesting thing is that they're one of the custodians also or of SLV, and yet they're buying PSLV.
right,
PSLV you can't short. SLV you can. PSLV is a more pure play, I guess, if you will, and it's less corrupt than well, it's not corrupt. What is corrupt is SLV and GLD ETFs that you can naked short, which is crazy. Let's see, what else can we say?
I also wanted to mention the record supply deficit last year, right?
Yeah, and they're
Record
expecting
breaking.
about the same thing this year, about
Yeah,
200 million ounces, and we'll see
yep.
that. We'll
And
see
it's
that
gonna
again this year.
right. I mean, and like these car manufacturers, every automobile company by the year 2030 will be electric, right? So imagine what type of what the demand would be: 2 billion ounces, 3 billion by then. Like who knows? Especially 5G towers and recycling. Like I made a video yesterday. This company in China is trying to start this huge global like recycling for precious metals. I don't even think that would be able to put a dent in the amount of silver we need. Like they could try, but I don't think recycling is enough. And when we talk about the silver shortage, I always see someone in the comment section say like, "Well, I could still buy silver on AppMex. There's no shortage." It's like it's not like that. It's a much bigger scale. It's not like I don't know. I just thought that was pretty funny, but
Well, I mean, look, and you always get the naysayers and you
yeah,
think you're talking your book. I mean, I guess my only comment to that is those people have never owned anything. Those
right,
people have never built anything. Those people weren't saying that to companies like mine 20 years ago when it was impossible to stay in business, when nobody wanted to hear anything from anyone that was doing anything with precious metals. And
right,
I just don't think that capitalism and being a good person have to be mutually exclusive. I think you can have good intentions and really want to be pure about what you're doing to help people out, to do the right thing, and to
right,
run a business, and to be proud about running a business that, you know, I come from nothing. I come from nothing. I mean, our company's name is Miles Franklin. My dad's middle name is Miles. His best friend lent us 60 grand. His middle name is Franklin. We started in a one-room office the size of a closet. And I come from nothing. And this country, I'm a patriot. This country, I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I'm a libertarian. I'm a patriot. This country has given me more opportunity than than I could have ever have hoped for. And luck is when opportunity meets preparation.
Mm,
And yeah, you have to be lucky in life, but you also can't drool on yourself when the
right.
opportunity presents itself. Which kind of leads me to another topic that I want to just touch on. Um, you know, we talk a lot. We've talked a lot about the BRICS. We've talked a lot about what it means, um, the things that are happening with the BRICS, and Saudi Arabia was formally admitted into the BRICS, as was Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates. So when you combine Iran, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia, you're talking 80%, man, 80% of global oil production is now under the BRICS control. And
Jeez.
what's really crazy, you look at really what this means. You have Saudi Arabia, and I'm going to dovetail it into a comment that you just made, who is on the Belt Road Initiative. We've talked about that with every other OPEC country, all of them on the Belt Road, which is the largest infrastructure project in human history. It's up to 75% of human population, 50% of
Jeez.
GDP globally, and growing. They have formally applied to the BRICS and have been accepted. They have formally applied to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which, again, let's just reiterate it, is the largest regional financial and military organization in the world. It's the Chinese army and Chinese markets and government behind it. They have formally applied to the BRICS New Development Bank. They told everyone in Davos that they'd be open to taking other currencies for oil. And you said we're going green by 2050. What you mean by that is the executive order that President Biden signed said that by 2030 we will be 50% green. That's just 6 years away. And by 2050, 85% green. So you can understand why Saudi Arabia is pitching their tent in another camp. And you know, one of the things that you and I haven't talked about, I don't think, is um, the financial or the economic advisory committee to the U.S. government. The number one economic advisor to the Biden administration is a man named Jared Bernstein, and his entire thesis is to shed the dollar's reserve status. He wrote a report or an article that was picked up in the New York Times, another one that was picked up in the Washington Post. The most famous one he wrote was Dethrone King Dollar, for which he advocates losing or shedding the world reserve currency status as a privilege we can no longer afford to have because of the imbalances and the distortions it creates. Well, I mean, if I wanted to lose the reserve status, the first thing I would do would be to weaponize the dollar and then sign an executive order. And by weaponizing the dollar, I mean kick Russia out of SWIFT,
Yeah.
take their Forex reserves, not just sanction them, but confiscate them and say they're going to rebuild the Ukraine. And then I would tell Saudi Arabia, which is the linchpin to the dollar hegemony, hey, thanks, but we're going green. In fact, we just signed an executive order. So when people ask me, who's going to trust China and Russia and this. I mean, okay, well, and my comeback has typically been, look, that's what gold and distributed ledger technology is all about. That's why gold was reclassified tier one. That's what I think they're going to do. But I've been giving it a lot of thought lately, and you talk about what does make the dollar the world reserve and what makes our markets what they are. I mean, the dollar is the world reserve for a few reasons. One, because we have the petro status. Well, I mean, in essence, you could argue the petro status is now gone because the argument or the deal was that we would protect you and you don't sell oil for any other currency besides US dollars. And then you recycle those dollars into our treasuries. Well, they're selling treasuries
Right.
and they're striking deals to like with China
Mm,
to sell their oil for yuan. You could argue that's gone. And the fact that they've
right.
joined the BRICS and the Belt Road and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the New Development Bank and have told the world they'll take other currencies, it is something that will be gone, if not completely gone, at some point. And then you talk about the full faith and credit of this country. Now, the 2022 balance sheet just came out, and it showed $155 trillion in debt. This is by the US own admission. 32 trillion on balance. I mean, on the
Right.
books, and then off balance sheet, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and government military pensions. They also showed what their asset base was. You can Google this. It's nauseating. They have 5 trillion in assets, just over. We do, of which 40% is student debt. Over 1.4 trillion they call the largest asset of the United States. I mean, how pathetic is that? So when you talk about credit, we are a banana republic. We are 125% debt to GDP. That meets the definition of a banana republic, but we do not jail our political opponents the way that some of these banana republics do in South America, right? Well, maybe not yet anyway. So do not think for a moment that this is something that the rest of the world is not noticing. And what I mean by that, the most disheartening of all of this stuff to me, and this is not a political statement, it's not, because I am not a political person. I am a libertarian. I'm a patriot who has gotten more out of this country than I could ever pay back. But you know, people have, as I've said on a few podcasts lately, walked from Central America to cross the border for a better life, floated on inner tubes tied with string from Cuba to find a better life. When we said the Pledge of Allegiance when we were kids, which I don't even think they do anymore, at the very end, liberty and justice for all. You know, how many people have risked their lives leaving authoritarian regimes to come to a better life that where liberty and justice was
Right.
equally applied? And when you look at what's happening in this country, where you see the weaponizing of the legal system, of the justice system, where it's not equally applied between the past administration and the current, no matter how you feel about Trump or how you feel about Biden, be honest with yourself and ask yourself, is this really equal? And I think most people would say, no, it's not. And that's a bad thing, because when you talk about what holds up the foundation of this country, it is trust. It is the fact that we have always been this beacon of liberty and honesty and truthfulness and trust, and we are being exposed. We are a country that is no longer unified. After World War II and the Great Depression, it was unification that built this country stronger and more powerful and honest and trustworthy. There was family, there was God, there was respect. You know, I grew up, my parents were hippies. I've seen it all: sex, drugs, rock and roll. I don't care what you do behind your doors. I'll respect you. You can still be my friend. Even if I don't do those things, we're good. You're my buddy. And now there is no respect. You have to celebrate. And that celebration is of cancel culture and transgenderism and all of these things that are ripping apart the fabric of unity in this country, where you're defined by who you voted for in the last election instead of who you are as a person. And that upsets me and troubles me more than anything. So when you talk about what backs the dollar besides the petro status, it is the full faith and credit of this country. Well, in terms of credit, we're broken, insolvent, and faith. Are we lacking in that category these days? I mean, it upsets me greatly. I got 3 kids, my youngest being 16. You have a young daughter, and I understand, what it's like to wonder what kind of world we're growing up in. And when you
Right.
talk about the BRICS and this formation of these countries where 80% of all of the oil that is controlled around the globe is now in this group, where 2 of the 3 largest nuclear arsenals are in this group, where right now, even before the addition of these countries, the BRICS nations will contribute more in 2023 to the global GDP than the G7 will. So you're talking about a very formidable foe. And
Can
there's
you explain real quick what the
yeah,
G7 is for those who don't know?
yeah, the G7 would be the United States, Canada, Great Britain, the Japan, Australia, Italy, I believe, and the what am I trying to say? The European Union. So let me just give you an exact. I think that's right, but hang on, G7. I'm
And a lot of
pretty.
those countries opted out.
So we have Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom, and the United
Didn't
States.
Japan
No, they're
is
still in it. They're still in it. So, it's a situation where the G7 is losing credibility. Let's talk about this for a moment. France is in the G7, right? So our allies are breaking ranks. And when we talk about France, that's really a very important one. You know, France was right there with us in 2022 when we sanctioned Russia. And so, right around, I don't know, right at the beginning of the year, a few months ago, Macron flew to China and met with Xi Jinping, and he signed an agreement whereby it was a 50-point treaty, trade agreement, where it ranged from 5G to military engagement. And he said all sorts of things about the West at that point where it was kind of illuminating. And then he asked to go or be admitted to the BRICS meeting August 22nd. They turned him down. He also did a massive liquid natural gas deal with United Arab Emirates and paid for it in yuan. Now, listen to what he just said after the BRICS meeting. He said, the world order is changing, which it is, and the situation is getting tougher and more complicated, which runs the risk of weakening the West and Europe in particular. He also stressed the need to avoid partitioning the world over the Ukraine war at a time when many countries from the global south have refused to condemn Russian aggression. Well, the global south are the BRICS. And listen to this. We must avoid a narrative that claims this is Europe's war. It doesn't concern us, he said. And then he goes on to say that France seeks to be a trusted partner on the geopolitical front. Is that like geopolitical or central bank Tinder? I don't understand exactly what he means by that. He's in the G7. It's almost as if he's pandering to this other
Yeah.
group from which he's trading with them. He's striking deals with them, wanted to go to the meeting. He's pushing back against what the West is doing against the war in the Ukraine. And you can see where his alliances or his allegiance is going. And so this is accelerating, no question about it. And you know, you're going to see the dollar lose its role in settlement. I'll give you one more example, and I'll take any questions you have. And that is, there's just the other day, a Chinese firm secured a very large contract from Iran to upgrade Iran's major international airport. But wait till you hear how they plan on paying for this. The contract was $2.7 billion, and that was awarded to the Chinese contractor. And the company had been selected, evidently, to carry out the project after intensive negotiations with other domestic and international companies. But what came out of it was that Iran will pay for the project using a barter mechanism that allows swapping crude oil for financial resources, equipment, and technical services. So little by little by little, it's a term called a logarithmic decay. Little, it's like being on Niagara Falls. You're going, and all of a sudden it starts to pitch just a little bit, little by little, by little, by little, by little, by little, by little,
Right.
then bang, all at
Yeah.
once. So what we are seeing is the little by little by little by little by little erosion
Yeah.
of the dollar in settlement and in terms of the way the world is looking at us. It's eroding little by little. So the August meeting didn't turn out to be this massive game-changing deal. They came out and said that we'll come back in a year when the meeting is in Russia. They told their all their financial the head of their financial what am I trying to say? Their minister, the finance ministers, to come back to study and come back with their findings on joint settlement currency, perhaps. But they stressed at the meeting that all of these countries in the BRICS use their own local currencies for settlement to break free from using the dollar in settlement. And that is something that you will see more and more and more of, where the erosion of settlement for the majority of all of the energy in the world will start to dramatically impact the dollar's reserve status. So big things are coming, man. And I mean, I could keep going on and on and on, but I mean, this is just since we've been gone. There's so many things
Yeah.
that are happening, and the acceleration. It's I think it's time to buckle up, and I really do believe that the fuse is going to come from the regional banks here yet before the end of the year, and this next one will be bailed in, if I had to guess.
Hmm. They say like 90% of the price changes in the last 10%, whatever, like most of the movement happens right at the end. And I always talk about that stars are aligning. perfect storm is here, and it does make sense.